welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and this is our monthly episode with members of the Kankakee County Museum, where we sit down and we take a look at just a sliver, just a piece of our county's history. And I'm pleased to welcome, of course, Jack Clacy and Jory Walters back to the podcast.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Always great to have both of you here as well. Before we dive in today's topic, I just always quickly want to go over just some of the events that are coming up with both the French Heritage Museum and the Kankakee County Museum. By the time this episode drops, you may still have time to reserve a spot for the dinner and a movie night that we're doing in the Column Garden, and that's going to be June 22nd. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the movie they're showing is Roman Holiday. I don't know what the dinner or who's catering the dinner or what the dinner is going to consist of, but I'm sure it's going to be delicious. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Rigo's or like Bennett Curtis, one of the two. I'm sure it's going to be either one of those that's doing this, but I know you can find out more information about that on the Kankakee County Museum's Facebook page. There's a Facebook event for it. June 27th, this is not necessarily a museum event, but it entails a museum, and that is the Cultivators Garden Walk. Once again, the Column Garden is going to be featured in the Cultivators Garden Walk this year. It's been, I think, a few years since they featured the Column Garden, but that's going to be June 27th. And then the big Bastille Day is July 14th. Now, in many years past, that was always at the French Heritage Museum, but we're trying out something different this year. And Jory, shout out to Jory. Yes, she's been working her butt off on this event, trying to get all the pieces together for it. And that is actually going to be at the Kankakee County Museum campus on the day. There's going to be a jazz, I think, trio or quartet there. Food, obviously, and so many other things happening that day. So you can get information on all these events and more at KankakeeCountyMuseum.com or on our Facebook and Instagram. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you guys want to mention, if there's any other events I forgot to list, but I know those are the bulk of the ones that are coming up. There'll be obviously more later in the year. Always got to plug the Gallery of Trees. We don't want to be thinking about summer or about winter yet, but you know.
But it comes up so quickly.
It really does. So yeah, check out those upcoming events, and there's always several more that are happening and taking place at either the French Heritage Museum or the Kankakee County Museum. Today, though, we are going to be focusing on the French Heritage Museum, aren't we? So, I don't know who wants to kick this off, but
Just show a picture there,
Let
Jory.
me show a picture of our French heritage.
So that Jory is showing a picture of the French Heritage Museum right now. If you cannot see it, if you're listening to this, and it was not always the French Heritage Museum. It's actually one of the oldest or the oldest building in the county, pretty close.
Not in the county, but in downtown Kankakee.
Okay.
It was built somewhere between 1860 and 1865, and what I've seen sort of pushes the idea towards 65, the end of the Civil War, by Lemuel Milk, who was a very prominent entrepreneur, farmer, landowner, you name it, he did it. In Kankakee and Iroquois counties for a number of years.
And this is Mr. Milk.
There is Lamar.
As I would imagine him to look like.
Yes.
Let me say real quick where it's located in case people don't know. If you're on Court Street and you're looking at the First Presbyterian Church, the Red Brick Church, it is directly in back of that. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at the Kankakee police station.
The Public Safety Center.
It's right across the street from that. It's on Indiana?
Yeah, technically It's on the southwest corner of Indiana and Oak Street.
It's in between there. Yep. So it's nestled kind of in between those familiar.
Yeah, and it's actually aligned with the alley between Indiana and Dearborn. And I was just thinking about that.
And there's the alley.
There it is in the 1970s when it was very deteriorated. One of the things you'll notice, and that, by the way, is looking south along the alley. That's the southern face. One thing you'll notice, there's no cupola on the building.
Yep.
And if you've gone by that building anytime in the last 2 months, you've seen scaffolding and people working up there because the museum or the Historical Society has had a major investment in totally rebuilding the cupola, which was on what was on the original building. In fact, this is the second rebuilding of the cupola in 1976, which we'll touch on later on. The building which you last saw there that had no cupola on, the cupola was rebuilt from apparently the original blueprints, and it lasted well obviously into the last year or two, but there were a lot of problems with water and deterioration of that, and it's very, very difficult to get at and work, which is why the contractor had to actually build a set of scaffolding around, and it was in place for close to 2 months, I think, and the workers would get up and down by a man lift.
Yep. Yeah, that was quite a project, and I can't.
We're soliciting donations.
We're still, we still gotta
cupola
right. We still got to pay that bill. I believe the 100 for History campaign this year is dedicated to that, and I can't remember because I've been to the recent board meetings for the Historical Society, and I can't remember in the meetings if they talked about if this new one was constructed from the same blueprints or not. That part I can't remember.
I don't think that it was. I think that it was just based on, because they didn't actually tear it apart.
They just kind of
piecemeal rebuilt it and took care of the problems of leakage and
right. That was the biggest problem.
That sort of thing.
I think the biggest part was kind of like the bottom of it was just kind of all rotted out.
Yeah, a number of years ago we had redone the roof with a steel roof, which is going to last us a long time, which is good. But at that point, because of some issues, especially from a budget standpoint, they did not do the work that really eventually needed to be done at the cupola. So now it's all up to date, I would hope.
I hope not. Knock on wood, right? The only other thing I think we've mentioned in previous episodes you've joked about is putting in an elevator.
Yes. Which would be fantastic to be able to make the second floor of where the meeting room, and we could also probably do additional exhibits up there, but it's not handicapped accessible from that standpoint.
No.
There's been some talk, and I'm not sure where it stands right now because I haven't been to board meetings in the last number of months, of using one of the lift type, track type things.
That's.
They would, in order to do that, I believe the main stairway is an L. So it would have to be done in 2 stages. The person would have to ride the little seat up to the landing.
And they'd probably have to ride another one.
Ride another one up to the back.
Yeah.
And that would be a very slow process.
And one person at a time.
Yeah, one person. Yeah.
But
pros and cons.
The cost of an elevator, putting an elevator into an existing building like that was very, very high.
Oh, gosh. I can only imagine how much that would cost. But we'll just put that on the bucket list.
That's it.
What predates, what leads up to the building of the stone barn?
Okay. Lemuel Milk, a 17-room red brick mansion on the southeast corner of Indiana and Oak, that is now the parking lot for the Park District Recreational Center, the old armory.
Okay.
And needed a place to keep his horses. This is horse and buggy days in the 1860s. And so he built the building we see now as a stable and carriage house that was built with native limestone, very solid, very substantial. The walls are quite thick. And it was the place to keep his purebred Morgan horses, carriage horses. He had actually not one but 2 sets of Morgan horses because he did so much traveling. He was, as I said, he owned property all over the place. So he spent a lot of time in his buggy going from place to place. Mm-hmm. So he alternated days on which team of horses he was going to use that day.
And if I'm not mistaken, to kind of piggyback off of that, wasn't he at one point the largest landowner in the area? Like he owned the most property?
I think, 25,000 acres, I think, Jory, if you recall. Yeah. About 25,000 acres in Kankakee, Iroquois counties, and then across the line in Indiana.
Sure.
Originally, his original farm, you've probably heard of Milks Grove Township in Iroquois County.
Yeah.
That was his first farm. He originally was a New York native and came to this area as a fully grown man. He had been in business for a number of years as a stock trader, buying and selling horses. Mm-hmm. And when he came here, he bought some land at what is now Milks Grove Township, and that was his first farm. And then he started buying up everything around. Ended up eventually with 25,000 acres.
That's how a lot of entrepreneurs came to our area from the East Coast as full-grown, successful men, and then came and invested and built and bought land.
And I would imagine a lot of that land he must have bought it from a lot of it from the railroad, right?
Some of it, but then others was public lands that could be bought for $2.50 an acre. Mm-hmm. And what he did, of course, when he developed all these lands, he farmed them, but he didn't farm them personally. He had I think he said he had at one point 150 different farms run by tenant farmers.
So a very European mindset almost.
I would think so.
Yeah, having the the Lord and the,
I think Jory has a picture down there of Lemuel Milk in his carriage with his Morgan horses.
Downtown Kankakee, you won't recognize it. Beautiful buildings.
That is in downtown.
So that's him coming
right in the middle there. Yes, with one of his two sets of Morgan horses.
So when you say Morgan horses, I'm imagining these are like the Cadillac of horses, right?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
For a carriage horse as opposed to a workhorse. The Morgans were bred for high class. As you say, the Cadillacs were. And I believe his team, and most of them I think were black. His teams were definitely matched blacks. That street that you see in the background there is the north side of Court Street, between Dearborn and almost down to Schuyler. Now, among the other things, in those buildings were the offices of two of the city's three newspapers at that time. I don't remember all three, but the Times was one, and
we could do a whole thing on newspapers.
Oh, yes. Well, and I'm sure we definitely will, too. I was just curious, in this picture you're showing now, are any of these buildings still there?
No,
none of these are.
They're all gone.
Because one of them actually looks very similar to where the Rubber Rose...
Oh, no, that's a block. That's a block.
That's further. Okay, that's a little further. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's the old Santos Hotel building.
Yes, but one of those looks very similar, I feel like.
It does. Yep.
Yeah. You see which one I'm talking about?
The one right here.
Yep. Yeah, that one looks very similar in architecture.
The one almost furthest to the left.
This one?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, just the way the windows...
Yep.
The windows are?
Yeah, most of the buildings at one time or other either burned down or were replaced with something else in the early years of the century.
Fires
were big.
Sure. Oh, yes. All the time. But, sorry, you can continue. I didn't mean to interrupt. I said I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're not interrupting at all. I think that after Milk died in 1893, and so after that, and I'm not sure when. I think that his mansion was taken down in the 1940s, demolished.
So it lasted.
A gas station, believe it or not.
And the gas station's not even there anymore.
Let me give you a picture of this area back in the time when Arsène was there. In urban geography class, we learned that big old houses that you see that are not so much beautiful anymore, but were close to downtown, or in this case, close to Court Street, and for a reason that it was prestigious to live close to downtown. And so where we have a lot of buildings today on Indiana, lots of buildings, as far as the eye can see from Court Street north, were all mansions and trees back in the day. Now you still have some houses that are close to downtown, not as many today, but back in the day they were the more prestigious people that lived in these homes, and being close to downtown was an asset. And then of course after time goes by, people moved out to the suburbs, but back in the day, so picture the Milk House with a lot of trees, with a lot of big old homes in this area that we see now as just industrial and buildings
commercial.
and parking lots.
Yeah, because we're talking just like a block from Court Street.
Yeah.
So
The churches were downtown; those were fixed. But after those, what you see after those would have been. We have one picture in particular that I can think of in our photo collection, taken from the courthouse above, looking down in this area. You can see, I believe you can see his home.
okay.
Maybe you can see the carriage house, but you see all green and beauty and homes.
And large trees.
Large trees along. And you don't see that, of course, today, but that's to give you, the viewer at home, an image of what downtown was like back in the day.
Do we not have any good pictures of his home?
We do not.
Oh, that's
There's one
unfortunate.
picture that is labeled his house, but it's a small frame house, and I'm not sure where that label came from.
Yeah.
But we have nothing of the big brick mansion.
I would imagine that was something.
Yeah.
Something to look at.
Interesting story. Jory was talking about distance from downtown and so forth. In the lot that is now part of the Presbyterian Church, it's kind of a small parking lot and so forth, there was a house built there by one of the Swanells, and I can't recall which one it was, but it was a big wooden, two-story, nice mansion. There's a diary that we have from, I believe, I don't remember which of the Swanells was, but his wife wrote about living in Kankakee at that period. And this is back in the 1860s, 70s perhaps. But she was complaining about the fact that the house was quite far from downtown. Because at that time, the downtown was East Avenue. And
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
East Avenue was the hopping spot.
That building eventually became the first YWCA in Kankakee. And it was there for a number of years until they built the facility out on East Court Street.
Oh.
There's all kinds of little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, and it's also interesting to me, getting back to, Lemuel's stone barn, that it wasn't on the same property. It was across the street.
Across the street, yeah.
That, to me, that also seems strange, but I suppose that's what was available to him, right? And his house was so big, it took up all the
Keep in mind,
space
too,
he had there.
At that time, Indiana Avenue was not a broad thoroughfare. It was probably a fairly narrow dirt road, or at best maybe graveled road. I don't think they started paving with brick until later on.
No, but I mean, it's pretty wide now, and obviously they never moved the stone barn, so they really widened out that road.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
They had the room. I'm saying there was still a good chunk of space there.
There was, there was quite a good distance. Now there may have been some other outbuildings that we don't know about too. It was sort of a large estate type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But after Milk died, the building went through a lot of tenants over the years.
Did it stay in his family then, I imagine? Is that?
I believe it was. I'm not sure how long it stayed in his family. It may well have been, and that it was rented out or whatever. But one of the first uses, and this was because this would have been probably well before the 1920s, it was the stable for the Kankakee Fire Department's horses.
Oh, cool.
If you think of what's now the public safety building, which was built as the city hall in the mid-1920s, mid to late, I don't remember exactly. But that was they became the downtown fire station, and I believe that was probably also the time when they shifted over from horsepower to mechanical horsepower to automotive type trucks. But then after the stable, it was an auto repair and painting garage for a while. And a sign painter had a workshop in there. I don't think any of these I think these were successive ones. They were not at the same time.
Sure.
And the last real strong note that we have as far as what it was used for was as a warehouse for the Swanell hardware store, which was a very big operation. It was at the corner of Dearborn and Court. And they did a lot of large, they would come in and outfit a whole household with all of the heating and that sort of stuff. And so they needed a warehouse to store all these things. For a time in the 1930s, there was a gas station there. A Texaco service station was on the front part of the lot, closer to Indiana Avenue. And I'm not sure if we have a picture. I know we have a picture of the one that was across the street where
we were just talking about where the mansion was, right?
But I don't think we have there. Just have a note to that extent.
And you said that was in the 1920s when the gas station came up?
1930s.
Oh, 1930s.
Yeah,
okay.
And then from the 30s through 70s, I don't think we have any specific
I heard
information.
it was a restaurant or bakery.
Yeah,
that was 1970s.
Yeah.
In fact, that was what I was going to mention next. In 1973, the building was in bad shape, as you kind of saw in one of the pictures. It had, I don't know whether it hadn't had a tenant for quite a while, but it was looking pretty deteriorated, and the cupola was gone. A furniture store manager in Kankakee, a man named Emmett Sullivan, he and his wife Jane and Don Delorier, who was the curator at the Kankakee County Museum, bought the property and put quite a bit of money and effort into remodeling and renovating it, and they finally opened a bakery and restaurant, and it was open, I think, from 6 in the morning to 6 at night from, I believe, probably Monday through Saturday. And the first couple of hours, 6 to 8, they served coffee and pastries, and from 8 and later, they offered a wider menu of things. And the baker was, and I can't think of his last name, but his first name was Arnie, and he was a native of Denmark. He was a Danish baker.
Oh, that's so cool. And did you go in there at all?
I never was there. I was in town at that time, but I don't recall that I ever ate there.
Okay.
In later years, under a different ownership, it was used, rented out at times for events like wedding reception, small wedding reception.
I was going to say, I know a couple that got married there, that had their wedding there.
And one of our daughters had a wedding shower.
Okay.
That was the only time I was in there as that part of it.
Yeah.
But apparently the Sullivans and Don Delorier located somewhere a set of blueprints for them because they rebuilt the cupola. And I'm not sure if that had survived and turned up in our collection or not. We didn't even think to look for it, but
sure,
we might want to look. We have quite a few building blueprints in various buildings in town, courtesy of the local architects. Mm-hmm. But it was pretty successful for a couple of years. But I think a couple of features of the revision or the renovation that are kind of interesting. If you're on the first floor of the museum, of the French Heritage Museum, if you look up, you'll notice a very huge wooden beam, 16 inches across, that runs the full length of the building to support the second floor. That was part of the renovation. That beam came from the Bear Brand hosiery factory.
Oh, that's cool.
Just north of the Jewel on Washington.
Yeah.
Or where Jewel on Washington is, and which was torn down, and they salvaged that beam.
That's
And I
awesome.
was talking to Ken Ponton, of another one of our volunteers in the museum, and knows a great deal about things like this, one day not too long ago. And he said, interestingly enough, that's not a one-piece beam. He thought it always was. But when he was working in there helping to convert it to the French Heritage Museum, he said it's actually in sections
Oh, wow.
somehow, but it takes the weight of the whole second floor.
Was
And
it-
underfoot, the flooring on the first floor is paving bricks that once were the surface of Dearborn Avenue south of Court Street.
Is that still there?
I believe there are sections of it that are
Yeah.
still brick. Yeah, I think some of it has been covered over, but
I believe so.
Of the floor in the museum?
yeah, on the first floor.
I just thought it was interesting, but I didn't know.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so
Did not
it's,
know that.
Recycling is good.
It's very good, yeah.
Let's see here. Now, Jory, of course, has been with the museum for ages and ages. When did you start?
I started volunteering in 2005.
Okay. Wow.
So you've seen
Coming
of
on,
changes.
coming on 20 years.
And when we inherited the building, it was like, wow, we have a great piece of history, downtown history, that we can really make something of it. And it just so happens we have a huge French Canadian, lots of artifacts. And that's where they all went.
Right.
It's because of all the settlement in Bourbonnais.
Mhm.
And it just fits so perfectly.
Yeah.
The oldest building with the oldest French
That's right.
Canadian, the first people in this area. And it was great.
Yeah. It was meant
The story
to
of
be.
how that became into the hands of the Kankakee County Historical Society is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I assume before you get to that part, I assume it was pretty much being used for like wedding receptions and things like that up until the museum took it over.
No, I think there was a period there in the maybe 75 or thereabouts when it was. We're not sure because we haven't got we've got the information on when the restaurant opened, but not when it closed.
Okay.
But it was. I'm guessing it was probably 75 because Mrs. Walter Charlton, her husband Jack, was the president of First Trust and Savings Bank, and she was a Beckman. So they've gone that the family goes back forever.
Yes.
She purchased the building, which was empty apparently at that time, and donated it to the Kankakee Junior Service League. Junior Service League was a service club sort of organization for younger women as opposed to the older women's club members. And they did a lot of public service type activities through the years. They were very active here. She was one of the charter members of it. But
so they used the place to do projects and things like
it
that?
was
or-
actually the headquarters for the Junior Service League. They had programs there. They had various activities of the kind. And sometimes, I think that's when they took over, they probably did some of the renting out of the space for wedding showers and meetings and other events.
Gotcha.
Actually, the Junior Service League lasted for a pretty good amount of time, 3 or 4 decades. I think it was 2010. Their membership was way down, and they were not gaining new members. And I think they just disbanded the organization, and the building was turned over to the museum, to the Historical Society.
Okay, at that point.
And so we had a building, but what were we going to do with it?
Yeah, and both of you were around at that time.
That's right.
So, yeah, what was that like? How did it get turned over to the museum, or did you guys purchase it, or did someone donate it to
these,
you?
For $1 sort of transfers.
Okay.
And how it got involved with the French portion of it, because at this point it was just a building.
Right. It had been through so many different businesses and organizations. And
there was a man called Arsène de Noir, and he was a native of Kankakee County, I think of Kankakee itself, who was a very successful businessman up in Chicago. And he left, when he died in 1995, he left a pretty substantial bequest in his will to be used for a an exhibition or an exhibit honoring the history of the French Canadians in Kankakee County. Well, 95, we didn't have anything to do with that money at the moment, but it sat there and it was invested, of course, and gained
interest.
And so it grew for about 20 years until we got into the 15 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Before it became part of the. It became the initial funding of renovating the building and changing it over to a museum. The original concept was an exhibit, which might have been just an exhibit in the main museum. But since we had the money and now we had the building, we could do something with it. And I think that thousands of hours of man and woman power. And two people in particular spent huge amounts of time there. Was Ken Fonten, whom I mentioned before, and Connie Lacone, who was our curator, executive director at the museum for many years. She was the son or the daughter of a builder, contractor kind of person. So she grew up with a crowbar in her hands, apparently, because she and Ken and a number of other volunteers worked for the better part of 2 years, tearing out the interior uses and opening up, making it capable of being turned into a museum. The Historical Society, in combination with the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society and a couple other organizations in town, put together a French Heritage Committee to kind of guide and shape what was going to be done. And one of the things that came out of that committee was a decision to not restrict the museum to strictly French Canadians. Because although the French Canadians were the largest ethnic group to come here from various parts of Canada, but primarily Quebec City, Quebec and around there were two other sources of French-speaking emigrants. One, of course, was France itself. And I can't remember the name offhand right now, but one of the earlier immigrants from France who became a gunsmith and so forth, lived out in St. Anne, was directly from France, and it was a well-known family here from Palisards.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But there was also a fairly large group of people from Belgium.
Yeah.
The portion of Belgium known as Wallonia is a French-speaking province, and quite a few Belgian families came here from in that. A lot of them settled. Quite a few of them settled in Iroquois County, just up in the northern end around Clifton, Chabance, and the southern parts of Kankakee County. So that I think was probably a wise move, because really, if you look at the whole issue, we're not just narrowly a French-Canadian museum or a French-Canadian development. The community had a lot of development from other French-speaking families and individuals here. So
yeah,
it was a very interesting decision. And I know there's one panel on the museum, and I think it's been up to date now, but listing the names and origins of quite a few of the families, the early families before, let's say 1860.
And a map of Europe, of France, and then Belgium.
And isn't there, what's the name of isn't there a lady at the museum or in coalition with the museum? She works.
Norma Meyer.
Thank you. Yes.
She retired.
She did. Okay.
Unfortunately.
She did French-Canadian, or actually all, but French-Canadian histories for people.
Yeah.
For a long, long time. She did mine. I'm French-Canadian.
Of course you are.
So,
You're in good company.
I'm French-Canadian and Native American. And she brought me back to France about 1600. Excuse me. And then to the Native American tribe I'm related to, which is from the thumb of Michigan.
Okay.
Thumb area. In a huge name with very few vowels. So
Yes.
I don't have a clue how to pronounce it, but they all came to my area. So she did mine through my mom, my dad's mom, and my dad's dad, with French Canadian. So she did a great job. Many people ask for her. She did great with Ancestry.com. I don't do well with Ancestry.com. She did excellent, but I can do a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
So your the French heritage, or the French Canadian side of your family probably married a Native American into a Native American tribe. Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome. Which was very common. A lot of you hear, if you dive into any of the French Canadian heritage in our county here, you read a lot about marrying into the local tribes that were here. Yeah. So what is inside the museum, or what are some things that, because I'm assuming, Jack, at this time, were you the president
I was president in 72, so it was before this. And then I was, unfortunately, I really kind of got out of working with the museum because I was doing a lot of traveling up into the Chicago area for my business, and so I didn't have the time.
Yeah.
But the shaping of the museum and its content was really done by two people. The committee and the museum, or the Historical Society, didn't hire because they were never paid, but they named two local historians as co-curators to put the whole story together. One of them was Vic Johnson, of course.
Okay.
Vic Johnson is an incredible researcher.
Yes.
He's in his 90s now, so he's not active anymore.
No.
But or not active in historical research. And he wrote hundreds of columns through the years for the Journal and the up till now. The other was Dr. Charles Belisi, who is a native Frenchman.
Yep, I know Charles well.
And he is an author of a book called The French in Middle America. I think I can't recall the precise title, but
it's
tracing the history of the French through Canada and down into the southern Illinois area and so forth, and the evolution of the population.
Yes, yeah, he is very knowledgeable in that, and so I've thought he was involved with some of that, but I couldn't remember in particular if he was.
Yeah, Charles and Vic basically shaped it, and the approach is when you come in the building, and of course we have a lot of large murals that are taken with labeled type murals. The first thing on your right-hand side as you come in, there's a connection of French, Canadian, Bourbonnais names and pictures and so forth there. But then in the body of the museum itself, there are a number of very large display panels. You can go from one to another, which touch on different aspects of the French Canadian or French speaking experience in Kankakee County. There are a lot of artifacts, as Jory mentioned, because we had played there. There are artifacts from Noel Devasser and his family.
Oh, wow, really?
A table or a little desk?
Yeah, and his, I think Wachiki's, his wife's dress, which her waist is like that big. Yeah. And you're like, how can that be?
Was that Wachiki's or was both?
One of them. I can't remember which one, but a dress.
Yes.
Okay.
One of his wife's.
Well, for those that don't know, Wachiki is Watsika.
Yeah.
Right.
So, So,
the
wow.
native, the Potawatomi woman who was Noel Devasser's first wife.
Yes.
And who then went west with the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
They were divorced, and then he had two other wives later on. One was Ruth Bull, who was...
Maybe that was her dress. Can't remember what there is a dress with a very tiny waist.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, how can that be?
It's before Oreos, you know.
I think so. But at the beginning, when you walk in, we start in France with the king and talking about French background. And then as you go in, because it all starts there, basically, because people went to Canada from France and from here. So it starts there, and then you get into it and you see different aspects, like you said, you see the university, the college.
No, St.
St. Viator. Yeah.
Which, of course, was
a French
big item in town.
Yes.
So you see a bit about that, a bit about the the voyageurs.
Oh yes, the
The
Courriers du Bois.
And then you see the beginnings of Kankakee in boards with pictures. But you see a lot of artifacts everywhere. And then on other walls you see names, family names that all came.
Yeah, some maybe not family trees, but something
Similar,
a little more basic than that.
So
Yeah.
if you have like both the names, actually all the names that are related to me are on that.
Okay.
That I can identify through my family are on that.
Yeah. Oh, it's insane. Like just to give you an idea of like Blanchetts, for instance, there are so many people that have ties to the Blanchetts family. And I'm one of them. And it seems like on a weekly basis, I encounter someone who also has a tie to the Blanchetts family, and I that's not the only family, but I just throw that one out there because that's the one I think of with my family, and a lot of it just has to do with they had a lot of kids, and those families were big, and it wasn't just the Blanchetts. A lot of those families were just so
uncommon. In fact, it was probably quite common for many of those early families.
Yeah, so I mean. And that's how all of that gets traced back as just...
I'm Papanoff.
Okay.
I guess I'm the outlier. I have no French.
I was going to say, man, Jack
I am a stolid German Swiss.
I have a little German in me too.
Yes, same.
Dutch, but
yeah, it's wild. Just learning how the just tying back to that Blanchetts family that comes from St. George,
Oh yes.
So yeah,
and then
generating the first bishop of
yes
from this area.
And then remembering that the French Canadians settled in the 1830s.
Yes.
But Kankakee wasn't developed until the 1850s.
Yeah.
And then this building in particular wasn't until the 1860s.
Yep.
And then you had Bradley in the middle. That was a whole bunch of nothing land
Until the
1890s. So it was a huge influence and a huge difference between the three. But we all merged kind of into one. So this building is quite old, but the French Canadian heritage is much older.
It's just funny to think, not that the stone barn is a person, but just think of all the things that stone barn, if it was a person, has seen, just because it's the oldest building in downtown, just it's seen pretty much all the courthouses, right? We've had we're on our third one, so just in particular, all the things that
That's right. A lot of change.
I just sorry, go ahead, Jory.
You can do also a tour. If you take a tour of this museum, you can also go right up into it because it has like a semi-third floor, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
And we can go up there and see a little bit up close the skylight.
Very complex framing and so forth, and I think that had to do with its origin as a barn. Because I noticed in one of the pictures a number of years ago, the door on the alley side was probably the barn door because it's a wider door.
Yeah.
There are two smaller doors, one on the north end and, of course, the one on the east side, which is our normal entrance now. But in the days when we were serving as
the alley side.
Serving as a stable, you had to have room to get the carriage in and out and the horses in and out, so there's a big double door. And above that, in some of the pictures, I think maybe in that one it shows, no, I don't see it, but there was another one I'm looking at, there was a metal framework up above the second floor that apparently was probably where they had a pulley and they could raise bales of hay and so forth up and store them away on the second floor. I think that is gone. I haven't seen it. I don't recall seeing it since any time, but I did see it in one of the older pictures.
Okay.
Just the framework itself.
Sure.
But the French Heritage Museum at the Stone Barn took its formal birth, I guess, on the 28th of July, 2012. It was a 2-day event. The first day was the formal opening attended by 100 invited guests, including, of course, the usual core of politicians. And the representative of the Canadian province of Quebec, and also representative of the governments of France and Belgium.
That's so cool.
And they were greeted, among other things, with displays of the flags of all three everywhere. And we went out and we found, this size 6-inch wide flags from the different places, and we used those liberally in decorating. And that was the formal opening. But then the following day, it was open house for anybody in the community who wanted to come and visit and see what was going on. And there were several hundred people attending the open house. And they were all pretty well wowed by it because it was something that had never been seen before.
No, it was brand new. And I always forget that that's only, to me, like 12 years ago wasn't that long ago. I keep thinking like, wow, I forgot it was that recent.
That's right.
You know,
it just seems longer ago.
It does for some reason. I don't know. Maybe because I think of how old the stone barn is, so I automatically think that the museum's been there for longer than 12 years. But, sorry.
It's well received, well liked by everybody who visits.
Yes. And there's still, since it is only 12 years old, there's still a lot of people that don't know about it. So it's another reason why we're talking about it too. And then going back to kind of the age of the building, these expensive buildings or these old buildings are expensive to maintain. Yes. Obviously, we're, again, talking about the cupola. So like the celebration coming up on Bastille Day, money raised from that will be used to help pay for the repair of the cupola and whatever else.
And we have a lot of ongoing expense, of course, because of the need to heat and light the building. And even in the wintertime, we were only open basically from, May to December? April through December.
Yeah, it's usually April 3rd. We're late this year just because of the construction, but usually it's April through
1 to 4 p.m. on Saturdays. But the rest of the time you still have to heat the building and so forth. And of course, because of the genealogical aspect, we pay a fee for cable and also the software for tracing and so forth. Something kind of interesting as far as the cost of the building. The building is air conditioned. It originally was air conditioned also, but somewhere along the line, after the museum acquired it and was beginning to look at, somebody came along in the middle of the night, and the air conditioning units were outside the outdoor portion. There were several large ones just outside the building on the Oak Street side. They were stolen.
No.
Right across the street from the police department.
And we're talking about like the big
ones, yeah. They had somebody to move a truck in there and big commercial air conditioning condensers or whatever they are.
Wow.
Yeah, but this was...
They probably scrapped them, I'm assuming, for money.
I don't think so, but they're right across the street from the police department, so nobody noticed it.
How in the... It's like you hear of these people that steal heavy equipment, like heavy machinery that are used on like front loaders and things that. The front loader just disappears, and how in the world does a front loader just disappear?
Or those who drive their truck up to an ATM and jerk the ATM out of the building.
That too. Yeah. Wow.
After the new air conditioning equipment was put in, there was a high, tightly locked up fence around it, so we haven't had any problems since then.
Man. As Jack said, French Heritage Museum open every Saturday from April almost through the end of the year.
Yeah, first part, late November to early December, depending on
yes. Again, if you're listening to this before Bastille Day, see if you can still get tickets for that celebration. That'll be coming up July 14th. It'll actually be at the Kankakee County Museum just because there's more room at the Kankakee County Museum versus the French Heritage. Yeah, and that too. It's just more accessible.
Right.
There's more room. Yeah, more room for parking. Things like that. But is there anything else that Jack or Jory you want to mention about the French Heritage Museum?
They also have a gift shop.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right.
French
items.
Lots of things. And give a tour if you would like a tour. And the upstairs, I will say, it has a kitchen upstairs and bathrooms and a very large space and books. So it is nice, and we just wish we could
we've had
utilize it a little
number
bit
of programs
better.
up there that, it was a very nice space to have a speech or a program. But
I know in
the
previous
problem is getting people up and down if they don't have mobility.
Yeah, the elevator thing again. Because I know in previous years, I remember Veronica, I think, did it's like a kids camp, like a week-long kids camp, I think, in the summertime. So, there's...
She and Camille, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But if you want to do a tour, we're happy to give you a tour, and you can learn all about our French-Canadian heritage in this area and how important it is to the cities and the counties' history.
Speaking of tours, I think among the tours through the years have been groups from Canada who have come down, and of course a lot of individuals who are tourists who are coming through the area or who knew about it would come. And so if you look at our guest book in there, there's a lot of countries and a lot of states represented.
Well, and as you mentioned before, I know I've heard about people from Belgium coming as well. Just as you mentioned, that's part of the group that's represented there, is that a French-speaking province in Belgium. So I've definitely heard of Belgian visitors coming just to, go to that go to our museum, which is so cool.
Yeah, and we're on, of course, the French Heritage Corridor, which is Interstate 57 through this area. So that helps too, because it all ties together.
Yes.
And we maintain a strong relationship with our friends in Bourbonnais at the Bourbonnais Grove Historical Society. We do some joint activities from time to time.
Yes. Okay. Well, Jack and Jory, as always, thank you so much, both.
Thank you.
It's always great having you here.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
No matter what we're talking about, we always have a good time.
Absolutely. And we'll look forward to the next time. In the meantime, just make sure you go check out either campus that the Kankakee County Historical Society has to offer to you, the Kankakee County Museum and the French Heritage Museum. You can go to KankakeeCountyMuseum.com to learn more, and also Facebook and Instagram as well, just to stay up to date on everything that's going on, because there's more and more things going on at either campus. So Veronica does such a great job putting on all these different events. And
if you need any research on anything, let me know.
Yeah, Jory will hook you up. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir, as always.
That concludes this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Stephanie Vanderweide for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name announced on a future episode, you can sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, and Edward Jones Financial Advisor Adam Elroy. Kankakee Podcast is produced by the fine team at Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. Learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.